In Ratchet 1, Clank was a freeloader. In Ratchet 2, we didn't even bother rescuing him. In Ratchet 3, we finally allowed him to help out. So in Ratchet 4, how does he repay us? By taking a cushy office job while we do all the hard work. So Ratchet is going to prove just how independent he truly is, and he's going to do it all without bending his knees. Can you beat Ratchet deadlocked without jumping? Let's find out. Here are the rules. But first, did you know that the new Game Plus speedrun category for Ratchet Deadlocked is under 6 minutes? This is all due to an oversight in the game's code that allows players to warp right to the final level. It's things like this that make me curious how games work under the hood, which is why I'm glad to have boot.dev sponsor this video. If you ever wanted to learn coding online but assumed it would be too expensive, difficult, or boring, then join the club. I used to think exactly that. That's where boot.dev really shines. They already know the learning process can be boring, which is why they've designed their courses like you're playing an RPG. You can level up with experience points and complete quests along the way. Plus, they couldn't have made it easier to get started. They've divided their courses by the different types of coding languages, including Python, Go, JavaScript, SQL, and more. Each course eases you in at a nice pace, and it has you writing your own code bit by bit, which in my opinion is undoubtedly the best way to learn. I've been using boot.dev myself to learn SQL. It's so satisfying once it starts to click, and before long I was able to write my own SQL statements from scratch. I've said it before, but I really wish boot.dev had been around when I was first learning coding. I'd probably still be doing it today and earning as much as $100,000 a year, which is not an unusual salary for back-end developers nowadays. Finally, all of boot.dev's courses are completely free to read and watch in guest mode. A paid membership would unlock all the fun RPG elements and progress tracking, and speaking of memberships, our promo code NG+ will give you a 25% discount for your first payment. If you opt for the annual membership, that is a saving of £155. So make sure you use the promo code NG+ when signing up, or simply use the link at the top of our description or in the pinned comment. Thank you for checking out boot.dev, and thank you boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Back to the rules. Rule number 1, no jumping, which basically means don't press the jump button while our feet are on the ground. Rule number 2, glitches are fine, just no hacking. And finally, rule number 3, once we beat the final boss, Gleeman Vox, we win! For this run, we will be playing the PS3 version of the game running on a PS5, as it's the only version I have access to. Full transparency, for this video I did 2 playthroughs, one on New Game and another on New Game Plus. I chose to use the footage from both playthroughs depending on which was more interesting. So if you notice any continuity errors like our maximum nanotech shooting up and down throughout the video, that's why. Right away, we're stuck in a pit as the game starts us off in a jumping tutorial. On New Game, we only have access to the starting 2 weapons, so our options are thin on the ground right away. It seemed like we would have to resort to a jump right away. There is a way to beat this tutorial in one single jump, but that still doesn't sit well with me. You could argue that this is just a tutorial and we could just skip it, or maybe we could just turn this into a minimum jump challenge, but I don't like either of those ideas personally. This is why I decided to do a second playthrough on New Game Plus, since we can carry over all of our weapons and gadgets from a completed playthrough. I'll start by explaining how we beat this tutorial in a single jump on New Game. First, we jump and perform a hyperstrike in mid-air. Then we pause the game during the hyperstrike, then we open the game's control settings. If we then unpause the game, we can quickly perform another hyperstrike before we start to fall. This gives us slightly more height than we should have gotten. The reason this works is that opening the control settings screen resets Ratchet's current animation. So the first hyperstrike animation is cancelled, but we maintain the extra height, and we can quickly perform another hyperstrike after unpausing. It's also very possible to chain hyperstrikes like this infinitely. This provides us with infinite height, so we can reach the tallest platform from the very bottom. From here we can shoot all the targets, and to reach the end we can fall over the edge to begin our hyperstrike chain without needing to jump. We can also hold a direction during the hyperstrikes to move in that direction. This trick is called hyperstacking by the Ratchet community, but as you can see, even though we had to jump initially to start the hyperstack, this trick is far too OP. We decided that hyperstacking would be against our rules. This is another reason we decided to do a New Game Game Plus playthrough, because with all of our weapons and gadgets carried over, we can beat the tutorial in 0 jumps and no hyperstacking. Here's how. The most useful weapon we have is the Hunter Mine. We can use it to plant mines down underneath us, and if we do that while hugging a wall, we can stand on top of them. If we then open the game's control menu while standing on the mines and unpause the game, Ratchet will go into his free-falling animation, which allows him to grab the edge of a nearby platform. After doing this twice, we can hit the high-up target from below by launching a mini turret up there. We then use the Hunter Mines once again to climb these steps, but we ran out of mines right before the last step. We can't use the mini turrets in the same way as the mines, as they don't have any hit detection. We just walk right through them. Instead, we can use the wrench swings to climb this last step as it's slightly sloped. We're in the Dread Zone now, and when we defeat the first wave of enemies, 2 platforms float out of the lava. They're a bit too high up to get on top of, and we don't bounce out of the lava in this game, we just sink immediately. However, if we strafe towards the center of the floating platform and wrench swing a few times, Ratchet just sort of steps up onto it. We can just run onto the second platform as it's just close enough, and the next gap can be cleared with a quick hyperstrike as we fall over the edge. The next obstacle looks very bleak. There are loads of platforms over lava with wider gaps than before. We need another method of getting across them. One of the gadgets we carried over into New Game Plus are the charge boots. We can use them to charge forwards, but the first platform is a bit too high up. However, there is a nanotech crate behind us, right next to the slope, and we can use it to get up the slope. From here we have the height we need, but the charge boots will definitely overshoot the platform. If we fire the magma cannon during a charge, it cancels the charge and we can land on the first platform. This is called charge cancelling. We can clear the second gap in the same way, but the next platform is too high. The platform beyond it is the same height though. We can skip straight to this platform by adding another step to the charge cancel. Immediately after firing the cannon, we hold triangle to open the weapon select, which will also pause the game if our settings are right. We switch to another weapon called the Leviathan Flail, which has the same moves and animations as the wrench. We quickly hit a hyperstrike with the flail before we touch the lava, and our momentum carries us over to the platform we're trying to reach. There's even a version of this trick that doesn't require the cannon at all. We charge over the edge, quickly pause, and open the control settings to cancel Ratchet's animation. Unpause and quickly hit a hyperstrike. The momentum from the charge still carries us a fair distance. Yet another thing we can add to these strats. We can place some mines down on a lower platform before charging over it. This allows us to maintain our height as we use the charge cancel. We repeat these various techniques to cross all the gaps in this level. We don't need to clear the last few platforms, as we can throw an EMP grenade and defeat the turret at the end of the level from here. It was at this point I realised how bad the stuttering and clipping is in the cutscenes of the PS3 version of this game. I assumed it was the version on the PS5 causing this, but apparently this is just how the PS3 version is. Also, if the camera gets too close to the characters, this happens. Combat never requires any jumps. It does take a little while to get used to not using side flips to avoid projectiles though. The second level, Catacomb Graveyard, is a bit more difficult. After we defeat a few enemies and a turret, there are a couple of platforms and a jump pad directly following them that launches us up to the end of the area. The end of the level is far too high to reach with the strats we've been using so far. Of course, jump pads are banned. The word jump is in the name after all. However, there is a very interesting glitch we can use instead. First of all, this glitch requires us to take damage, so to reduce all incoming damage, we adjust the game's difficulty all the way down. Certain sources of damage make this glitch easier to perform, and turret fire is perfect for it. The setup for the glitch is to hit the turret with an EMP to stun it. We then get into this position and wait for the turret to start shooting us. Right as it's about to hit us, we use the charge boots to launch ourselves into its bullets. The damage cancels the charge, and then we immediately hold L1 to enter first person view during the damage animation. We now rotate a bit to the right to face towards where we want to go. The turret continues refused to fire, so now we are taking damage. After taking several hits, we wait until the red flash is gone, and then we press square to throw the wrench. Before the wrench comes back to us, we let go of L1 to exit first person view, and then immediately start mashing the square button to continuously swing the wrench. We are now flying through the air in straight lines. We can use directional inputs to change the direction that we travel, and we should stay airborne as long as we don't stop mashing square. Our goal is to reach the back of this level behind the upper platform we're trying to reach. There is a slightly sloped wall back here that we can wrench swing our way up. This glitch is called air swinging. Something to note is when activating the air swing glitch, we can't change direction for the first time until the wrench is back in Ratchet's hands. From the back of the level, we can use various techniques that we learned in the tutorial to scale our way to the top. These include charge cancels into hyperstrikes, and using the hunter mines to reach the lower ledges. The blue light beacon always signals the final destination of whatever level we're in, but its hitbox is fairly big in some levels, so we just need to get close to it. The rest of this level is pretty much all combat focused with no real platforming. The same goes with the next planet, Sarathos. It's either all combat focused or vehicle sections, so we'll move on to planet Kronos. This planet starts off with combat sections, but we do still need to travel from area to area. There is a step we need to get up, but we don't even need our weapons or gadgets to get up there. We can strafe over the edge, grab the ledge, and pull ourselves up. Shortly after that, there is a section we need to grind over. Once again, the ledge grab comes to our rescue. We fall over the edge underneath the zip line, pull ourselves up, and land on the zip line. The next challenge starts with another zip line, but the same solution can be used to get onto it. This is followed up by a boss fight that doesn't require any jumps at all. The next challenge is where things start to look bleak. First, we need to get onto this elevator, but we can just use the hunter mines to get on. The swing shot can be used without jumping to reach the grind rail, and it's quite a long series of grind rails. There are several rings across the rail that damage us as we bump into them, and of course we can't jump over them like the game wants us to. Not only that, but we are required to jump from one grind rail to another to make progress. We tried opening the control settings during the grind to see if it interrupted Ratchet's grind animation, but apparently not. If we want to reach the end of this level without jumping or hyperstacking, we need to use a new trick, and it requires the hunter mines again. Instead of taking the elevator at the beginning, we turn around and head to the big door we came through at the end of the previous challenge. We stand side on to the door and fire a hunter mine into it. As the mine collides with the door, it stops travelling forward, which gives us time to stand under the mine before it lands. If we get the positioning just right, the mine will clip Ratchet through the door. Would you believe the end of this level, which is signaled by the big blue light, can actually be reached from beyond this door? We use another ledge grab to get us over this step again. There's an orange barrier in our way, but another mine clip gets us through here too. Sometimes I would clip inside the mine instead, but a wrench swing towards the door would clip me through. Now, all that separates us from the end of the level is this fairly wide gap. If we can cross this gap, we would skip the entire grind rail section. We need to use the charge boots for this, but if we charge into one of the small orange lights, we will bonk into it. Instead, we will charge directly to the right of the light, as we can still gain a little bit of height that way. As we charge over the edge, we fire the magma cannon to cancel the charge animation, and then quickly switch to the flail to perform a hyperstrike, whilst still carrying the momentum from the charge. And then we quickly pause and open the control settings to cancel the hyperstrike animation. When we unpause, since Ratchet's hyperstrike animation was cancelled, he can now grab the edge, but only just. Pulling up here triggers the end of the level. The next level on this planet starts with another elevator we need to use the hunter mine to get on top of. Shortly after that, there's an even higher ledge, but we can use the same strats we used in the tutorial. The final level of this planet has another grind rail section, but once again, if we turn around at the start of the level, we can clip back through the big door with a mine again, and then start to backtrack through the previous level. We nearly didn't make it through the door without falling to our death, but we just managed to save ourselves. There's one final wide gap between us and the end of the level. We use a charge cancel with the magma cannon and hit a hyperstrike with the flail to just make it to the ledge. Once again, we have skipped an entire grind rail section. The planet ends with a boss fight that doesn't require any jumps. We're back in the dread zone now, which means more platforming sections similar to the start of the game. The gap to the first floating platform is a bit wider this time, and Ratchet can't grab the edge of these floating platforms either. In our first playthrough, we figured out a way to gain some height to start a hyperstack. During the combat, just just before the floating platforms, there are a few short walls that raise from the ground. It's intended that we use these walls to hide behind during combat, but if we know when they raise up, we can stand on top of the wall ahead of time to get lifted up with it. We defeat the remaining enemies from the wall, and we can charge cancel with the control settings screen to begin the hyperstack. This was pretty satisfying to figure out, but if we're not allowing hyperstacks on New Game Plus, we need another method. We try to charge over the lava just before the platforms raise out of the lava, hoping they would carry us up. But even when we landed on the platform perfectly, the game still decided that we died. What did work though, we ran over the edge just before the platforms rose out of the lava. We opened and closed the control settings, which allowed us to hit a quick hyperstrike, and we landed on the platform as it came up. A charge into a flail hyperstrike gets us across the rest of the lava. It doesn't get any easier though, as there are more platforms to cross. The first of these platforms is too low down and wouldn't be helpful to reach, as we would struggle to reach any further platforms. We wrench swing up this slope and use mines to grab onto this small bit of geometry. From here, we can charge cancel straight to the second platform. The same strategy can be used to skip a couple more of the higher platforms, and regular charge cancels get us the rest of the way. Since the platforms in the next platforming sections are all quite low down, we can just use regular charge cancels to make it all the way across. The next challenge is the Tower of Power, a long, mostly vertical platforming section, full of rotating platforms that can't be grabbed. This is going to be the most difficult level so far, so let's get started. If we run up the back of this light fixture on the edge of our starting platform, sometimes the collision causes Ratchet to boost upwards slightly. If we time it right, we can use this to get a hyperstrike that just gets us onto the first platform. From here, we need to use charge cancels to cross these platforms, but since all of them rotate on a timer, we need to be very quick. It helps if we back up as far as we can before charging to add momentum. Once we cross all these platforms, we are attacked by 2 laser turrets and some flying enemies. We take them out, and now the next part of this level consists of even more rotating platforms that ascend upwards like a staircase. Just by looking at this, I was ready to call this level impossible, but then we had an idea. First of all, we can walk up this small sloped part in the corner, and then use a charge cancel to hyperstrike onto the first platform. Now for the more difficult part. We need to use the platform's rotation to our advantage. Easier said than done. We stand on the right side at the back and wait for the platform to rotate. We can tell when the platform is about to rotate due to the flashing lights on the side. As it flips over, we charge forward as we get lifted up. If we time it perfectly, we can charge along the edge of the platform mid-rotation. We use the control settings to charge cancel, and then hit a hyperstrike. If our timing and positioning were both perfect, we can make it onto the next platform. This was quite a bit more difficult than it looked, and we have to do this 4 more times to reach the next main ledge. So we inevitably fell into the lava right at the end. However, as luck would have it, we got just close enough to that ledge for the game to give us a checkpoint up there. To reach the next platform, there's another sloped bit in the corner, and the platform clips through it as it rotates. So we can just let that platform scoop us up if we time it right. From there, we can use the exact same method as before to reach the next part of the tower. There are some stationary platforms to our side that glow green, and if we want, we can charge cancel onto the green platform to take a break, since these ones will never rotate. No charge necessary for the final gap, as we can just run off the platform during the rotation to grab the edge. I know that this video made all of that look quick and easy, but it took me like an hour and a half to get this far, and this is where my hopes were dashed. The rest of the platforms don't rotate. Instead, they fall down after standing on them for about a second. We don't have a method of crossing these, and even if we did, only being able to stand on the platforms for about a second before they fall wouldn't give us enough time to try anything anyway. However, there is something else we can try, and it's all thanks to those 2 laser turrets at the bottom of the tower. The plan is to use another air swing, but this one is a fair bit more difficult than the first one. The first thing to mention is that we don't want those turrets getting destroyed, and since these turrets are weaker than the big turret that we use back on the Catacomb Graveyard, our robots can sometimes destroy them before we can use them. We can solve this by setting the game's difficulty higher, as this gives the turrets more hit points. As we make it to the 2 turrets, we need to quickly charge into the laser attack from the first turret. During the damage animation, instead of going straight into first person view, we open the control settings first, and then we go straight into first person view as we unpause. We need to adjust our aim quickly, as the idea is to use the damage that we receive from the second laser turret before launching off into an air swing. This is why we use the control settings screen to cancel the damage animation quicker before going into first person. It's quite tricky to get the hang of this sequence, but when we do, there's another tricky part. We need to aim for a certain sloped wall that we can use to climb all the way up. It took a fair few tries, but when we finally nailed the angle, we shoot upward very fast. And then we need to quickly turn away from the wall and head towards the very top of the tower. Once we're up here, we make quick work of the enemies, and with that we move on to Planet Shah. There's not much to say about this planet though. It's all combat and vehicle sections. The crawler mech can jump, but it's never required. The end of the planet has us searching all over for bolt cranks. Some are higher up than others, but all of them can be reached without jumping, no problem. The next planet is Auxon. It's mostly all combat here too, but after winning a battle on the ground level, the game expects us to use a jump pad to reach the bolt crank on the upper level. We can get around using the jump pad by finding this orange barrier and clipping through it with a mine. There's a big step we need to get up. We tried using a mine, but it ended up just clipping us into the step, which killed us. Instead, we can touch the deadly liquid nearby to damage boost up the step. There's a large door we need to clip through. The floor next to the door is sloped, so our mines just slip down. But using 2 mines lined up is enough to get us through. 1 more mine clip after that to get through the obstacle on the other side of the door, and we're on the upper floor. After turning all the bolt cranks, the next level takes us through the area we just clipped our way through. After that, it's just another crawler mech level, so that's Auxon finished. We're called back to the Dread Zone once again. After a battle, we need to grind through a tunnel. Thankfully, we can just walk onto the grind rail from the floor. We're also able to tank all the damage from the rings since there's not that many of them. After another battle, we need to use another series of charge cancels, with the only difference being that we're on a time limit. 1 boss fight later and we're done here. We're now off to the Valix Belt. It starts off with some grinding and platforming. We tried to use the usual ledge grab under the first zip line, but the game just decided that we died instead. So we just used a couple of mines to bump ourselves up onto the zip line. This worked much more reliably this time. We come to a few floating platforms that are fairly far apart. We can use the usual charge cancelling methods to cross each one. We just need to make sure to step back as far as we can. Not only does this give us the momentum we need, but it also tilts the back of the platform down a bit, so when we charge off the edge, we have as much height as we can get. There's a raised elevator we need to get on top of. We try to use the mines to stand on it, but even better, they clip us right through the bottom. A couple of zip lines and plenty of combat later, and we're done here. We head for the next planet, Torval. However, there's next to no platforming on this planet. It's all combat and vehicle sections once again. We have to visit the Dread Zone for a 4th time after this, but it's all just combat again, including a boss fight. So we'll just move on to the next planet instead, Stygia. Things start with a mech section, but as soon as that's over, we're stuck. The game intends us to use a jump pad to reach the upper part of the level, and then stay up there for the rest of the level. There's nothing down here we can use to get up there without the jump pad. We can't reach the swing shot targets from down here, and there are no enemies down here that we can use to trigger an air swing. We can aggro a couple of the enemies on high up ledges by shooting rockets underneath them, and the enemies can even shoot us through the ground they're standing on. They tend to miss us a lot of the time, but the solution to that is to turn the game's difficulty all the way up to increase the enemy's accuracy. But now, for some reason, the enemies only seem to target our robots. We could also solve this by entering the level in local split screen co-op, as this removes our robots entirely. Even with our robots gone, getting hit once to cancel our charge is hard enough, what with the enemies being so far away. But getting hit a second time whilst in first person to trigger the air swing just isn't happening. The enemies simply lose interest in firing at us enough times, and besides that, looking at the environment, there aren't any sloped walls we could use to air swing our way upwards anyway. So it seems like we have no choice but to use this jump pad just once to add a single jump to our jump total. Or we could just skip this challenge entirely. So there's a glitch called load cancelling that only works on the PS3 version of this game. Load cancelling allows us to use a separate completed save file to skip almost any challenge in the entire game, as long as both our save files are on the same planet. Here's how it works. We need a pre-set up completed save file. We load into our initial save file onto the energy collector challenge, which is the one we're stuck on. We pause the game, and in the options we can load the completed save file, but when the game asks us to select a difficulty, we don't. Instead, we press triangle to cancel the difficulty select screen. We then select the Shields Up challenge on planet Stygia, which is the challenge after the one we're stuck on. We then pause the game and load the original save file where we were stuck, but once again we cancel the difficulty select screen. We can then proceed to complete this Shields Up challenge as normal, which doesn't require any jumping. Upon completing Shields Up, the game will consider this challenge to be complete on our initial save file, which then allows us to continue the game without ever needing to complete the challenge we were stuck on. Skipping an entire challenge with load cancelling kinda opens the floodgates though. In fact, this glitch can be used directly following the game's tutorial to skip all the way to the final level if we wanted to. Knowing that, using this glitch just to skip a single level is a bit controversial. So either we consider this level beatable in one single jump, or we allow load cancelling to skip over this one challenge. I'll let you decide. For the sake of the run, we will continue to the next planet, Moraxus. The first level starts off with another jump pad. We try to use our mines to reach the upper ledges instead, but it's just too high up. However, the ending of this level is triggered by reaching the vehicle behind the orange barrier. It's intended that we use the jump pad to reach a bolt crank to turn off the barrier, but we can just use a mine clip to go through the barrier instead. After a vehicle section, we come up to another zip line, only this one is a lot more awkward since the gap is filled with deadly liquid. So we can't use the ledge grab, and using mines is a lot more difficult with how close to the edge this zip line starts. If we slip off the mines and into the pit, we have to start the level all over again, which happened to us multiple times. Eventually, we discovered that we can stand on the edge before activating the zip line, and the robot will lift us up right onto the zip line as they activate it. The rest of the level is straightforward after that. We're sent to the dread zone again for the final time. It's all combat again, but there is another boss at the end. Ace will use bombs that create shockwaves that we're supposed to jump over, but we have no choice but to tank the damage. What's worse, he throws out 2 or 3 bombs per cycle, one right after the other, so we're bound to get hit by one of them at least. He also heals himself, so defeating him before his bombs kills us proves to be very challenging. I could have lowered the difficulty again, but I wanted to see if I could beat him without having to do so. We eventually realised that the shockwaves don't reach all the way from one side of the arena to the other, so we can stand on one side when we know the bombs are coming, and as soon as Ace throws a couple of them, we charge to the opposite side of the arena, which is just far enough to avoid the damage. Sometimes we would still get hit by the third shockwave, but that's better than getting hit by multiple shockwaves in a single cycle. As the fight starts, we drop a hollow shield to block Ace's fire, and that allows us to stand on the spot and fire off several fusion rifle shots for good damage. We time our charges right as Ace throws his second bomb to avoid the damage from both. We can even get a couple more rifle shots as we walk away. When Ace uses his own shield, we use that time to drop another hollow shield and set up several mini turrets for when his shield drops. We repeat this cycle while also grabbing some of the nanotech that spawns on the edge, along with some fusion rifle ammo. Once the rifle ammo is all used up, we can switch to the Arbiter rocket launcher. Eventually, Ace's health bar depletes completely, but he was still running around with a shield up. Anything would finish him off at this point, so we had a rocket with his name on it. That brings us to the final level of the game, the Ghost Station. This is another planet with a fairly lengthy grind rail section right at the start, but this time at no point are we required to jump from rail to rail. The only issues are the rings along the grind rail that we can't jump over. We decided to travel along the grind rails as intended to see if we could survive the journey. We made sure not to take any damage from any enemy at all, so we could save as much health as as possible for the grind rails. We also used the fusion rifle to take out the enemies along the grind rails before getting on them. We were too stubborn to lower the difficulty to reduce the damage we took, but fortunately there is some nanotech along the way. There was one point where we were one hit away from death, and there was a nanotech crate on the grind rail just before a ring, but Ratchet didn't actually receive the nanotech in time before hitting the ring, so we failed. Next time, we got onto the grind rail in first person, which allowed us to shoot the crate as we were approaching it. This gives the nanotech enough time to heal us before we hit the ring. However, irritatingly, we didn't have enough health left for the final grind rail. We collected all available nanotech, didn't take any damage from any enemy, and it still wasn't enough to make it through this section. There are obvious solutions to this, like leveling up our health or lowering the difficulty, etc. But there's also a quicker solution too. The end of this level isn't that far from the start of the level. We can see it from here. We can use a charge cancel into a hyperstrike to make it over to the central part of the area before we're supposed to. From here, we can do the same charge cancel to reach the beacon of light. Even though we fell just short of the ledge, we got just close enough to trigger the end of the level. The rest of this area is all combat missions, but this is the level that I learned that you can man the turrets and then shoot your own hollow shields to level them up faster. This brings us to the game's finale. For some reason, the game's map puts a star on the wrong ship at this point. We're actually supposed to enter the smaller ship to reach the final level. We're on a time limit to reach the end. At first, we thought these rotating platforms would be a challenge, but you can just walk over them diagonally to avoid the flames. We can't use a ledge grab to get on the zip lines here since Ratchet can't grab the edge, but we have the space to use hunter mines instead. That brings us to the final boss fight against Gleeman Vox. Just like with Ace Hardlight, Vox has attacks that we would need to jump to avoid, but only in the second phase of the fight. These attacks are from the missiles as they hit the ground and the lasers. It was difficult to get enough damage on Vox before the lasers killed us first, but the solution was just to spam a series of high-level flail attacks underneath him until he was defeated. We have done it! Can you beat Ratchet Deadlocked without jumping? Yes! Sort of. No one's managed to beat the second challenge on planet Stygia without the jump pad or without hyperstacking. Here's hoping someone pulls it off one day. For now, we'll have to settle with using the load cancel glitch to skip the challenge. Thank you for watching. If you like challenge runs like this, then please subscribe. It's pretty much all we do here. Thank you to all those on the Ratchet Speedrun Discord server who helped me out, especially Skunk for their work on routing the jump plus run in the first place. If you like Ratchet Speedrun content, check out their channel, I'll link it in the description. And thank you to all of our biggest supporters. They are Aaron Goy, Abstinent Crow, Abyssal Renegade, Astian 3 Junior 9, Geefgert, Adam Booth, Alex Back, Alexa Griffith, Bone Reaper, Balthasset, Beeping Sheep, Biggie, Bliss, Bobasti, Bomber the Great, Brom, Bubba WA, Callum, Capra Demon, Carlos Lomax, Chub Master Chan, Clara B, Cordero C, Courageous Axolotl, Daku Kasai, Danny Goro, Daniel LeBlanc, Daphne Dawn, Dog Ringer, Don John Playfair, Dust Coins, Emperor Prime, Evolve Pixel, Exile, Fallout Boy, Fist the Nightly, Floop, Fluffy, Frightening, Fergie, Gamerbug, GB John, Gengar Guy, Get Dunked Carl, Gingy Ginge, Godly Diamonds, Grey's Agenda, Griffey, Grogbast, Hannibal La, HK Nux, It's Puppy Doll, J Kuma, J Wolftail, Django, J Trickster, Gel Hustinks, JP, Justin Becker, Justin Honeywell, King Bob Man, Koja Kaja, Cola Arrow, Kramer, Kyle Tocher, Liam Robinson, Lily Rose, Lochnath Shankar, Love is in the Air, Lud Ward, Mahjong, Carl Corbett, Matthew Venus, Maureen Jansen, Meow Bear, Naked Snake, Namneze, Nettrack, Nick CF, Noah Tess, Nola Hagame, Notarn, Ogbajoj, Owlotl, Pantechnic, Phaedra, Phoebe Draper, Playmaker, Rudiment, Rembo, Risotto, Rocket Plod, Roll Light, Rose Shades, Running Hands, Sentinel, Serenity, Shade Pokemon, Smegzilla, Some Dude Games, Sparmesh, Space Llama MK, Spectrum Z, Stall King, Stupid Ass Dog, Tempest Josh the Joker, The Xenocide, Therios, Thomas Williams, Thorgosh, Tim Tim Sugar, Totu, Typhoon Lex, Tai Bean, Vincent LaRocca, Vivi is Vicious, Wezzy, War Angel CP Game Break, Willow Rolf, Wooby, Utah Plays, Xanter, Zayon, Outie Biscuit, Borpotingus, Chrome Shack, Dweegi, Evolved Pixel, Finn Pride and Pixels, $40 Mouse, Hakey Joey, Hamscoffer, Hellraiser Wolf, Jesus Christ, John Fitz, Kaja, Cami, Luna Isle, Mebiman, Naomi the Unicorn Princess, Nick Adonis, Noscrumancer, Possible Psycho, Pride and Pixels, Potoma, Rev Jacques, Roredu, Slayer, Smegzilla, Spectrum Z, Static Jokes, Tanukimi, the Overachiever, the Jammy Emperor, Tor DS, Tauster, TrueDK0, Username JP, Vivi the Vicious, Zenut Soul, A Lazy Dragon, Aggie, Anthony Kermack, Bob, Bobastics, Intervencion, Melfi, Song of Shadows, Thomas Bickley, Tor, and Wesley Austin. Thank you every single one of you. That's a lot of people. If you'd like to see other Ratchet Challenge runs, then there will be a playlist on screen now. But what about Jack and Daxter Challenge runs, I hear you cry? Well, we have one of those too. I'll put it on screen as well. I really need to do more Jack and Daxter Challenge runs. If anyone's got any ideas, please let me know.